Hey everybody, Pete A. Turner, executive producer and host of The Break It Down Show. Today's guest is a guy named David Daniels, who is a nurse, and he's also an author. He wrote a book called Oh Nurse, and it chronicles his time as a nurse who works at the extremes. He's been a flight nurse, doing basically in-flight surgery to save lives. He's gone out on EMT trucks to the point of accidents to provide immediate care for people that have had problems. He's been an emergency room nurse for years and years and years. If you're in any way interested, or someone in your life is interested or considering the nursing field, this is the book to get. It's fantastic. It's available on Amazon. Just type in Oh Nurse or David Daniels. David's episode is produced by me, but also my buddy Brad Enright, who is a voiceover actor and book reader. So he read Oh Nurse and said, I got to get this story on the Break It Down show. Let's tell David's story, because what he does is incredible, how he explains it. And it's just a fascinating conversation with someone who has done some really interesting things in terms of medicine, nursing, and saving lives. Hey, if you like what we do, we can always use your support. Obviously, you can buy the shirts at breakitdownshow.com, but also you could share the show, subscribing, telling your friend to subscribe. Grab your loved one's phone and say, "Let me see your podcast app," and just hit subscribe. Rate, put 5 stars in there. These things help people find it. I don't know if you guys realize this, but once you get to a certain number of reviews and ratings on Apple Podcasts or Overcast or wherever it is that you listen, your show will always populate with new people. New people will discover it. That's how you help it. That's why we push so hard for this stuff, because getting to 1,200 reviews is an enormous barrier to get to. And to get there, that means people love your show. So if you love the show, subscribe, and that would be a big help. Final thing, and you know what we always do here at the end. We say, save the brave, savethebrave.org. We're out there trying to help veterans who have PTSD cope with it, deal with it, and get moving forward. There's a lot of veteran organizations. We talk to a lot of them on this show, and we try to understand what it takes to get them better. Part of it is community. Part is have something to look forward to. Part of it is having service to others. These are the things that we focus on at Save the Brave, savethebrave.org. Go in, monthly donation, $10, $20, $25, whatever it is. It's an enormous help towards what we're trying to build. Hey, thank you all so much. Here comes David Daniels.
Lions Rock Productions.
This is Jay Moore.
This is Greg Proops.
This is Jordan Harbinger.
This is Dexter from The Offspring.
This is Nathan
This
East.
is Sebastian Younger.
This is Rick Marotta.
This is Stuart Copeland.
This is Mick Gillette.
This is Andy Summers.
Hey, this is Skunk Baxter.
This is Gabby Reese.
This is Rob Bell.
Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero.
Hey, and this is Pete A. Turner.
Hi, my name is David Daniels, author of the book Oh Nurse, here on the Break It Down Show.
And now, the Break It Down Show with John Leon Guerrero and Pete A. Turner.
You know, we like to explore different topics, and David has written a book about nursing, and it's not like, then you put on your rubber gloves and that kind of thing. There's a lot more to it than that. And a lot more, gosh, Brad and I were talking off mic, a lot more varieties and types of nursing than I really ever, and I think there's a lot of varieties already, so it's even more vast than I realized. And so when Brad pitched me on this idea, I thought, shoot, man, let's get David on and let's talk about his book. Brad, why don't you introduce us to more about David and why we're talking to him?
Yeah, I met David kind of randomly. I'm an audiobook narrator, and I was looking for some new opportunities, and I came across Oh Nurse on BookBub, and I reached out to his publisher, and she gave me his contact information, and that's how he and I got in touch. Told him what I do and that I was interested in narrating Oh Nurse for audiobook. And we had some conversations, figured out how we could make it work, and we got the book put together, narrated, produced, and now it's available on Audible and Amazon. What I had learned in my conversations with David and reading his book in the preparation was just the extensive lines of work that he has done in his nursing career. When you think nurses, you always kind of think, what you see on TV, taking temperatures, putting on stitches, doing stitching and things like that. But, he's been an ER nurse. He's worked in ICUs. He's worked in pediatrics. He's worked as one that I had never heard of, which was a flight nurse on a helicopter, transporting patients through the air, from scenes where they may have gotten hurt, or from just a very remote location to another hospital, maybe where they could get more extensive and the proper care that they might need. And then also he was doing transports and things like that. So just the amount of work and the different types of nursing that he had done was really interesting. And I said, I've got family members that work in the medical field. I've got a degree in athletic training and sports medicine. So it was a very interesting topic all the way around for me.
Yeah, that's fascinating stuff. And then David, so people write books for lots of reasons. Obviously, you were pushed to do it. Let's just start right here. Why the heck does a nurse need to write a book? Hey, this is Pete A. Turner from the Break It Down Show, checking in real quick to ask you this. John, Scott, and I all support Save the Brave with our time, our location, our effort, and our money. Each month, we give a small amount. Do the same with us. Go to savethebrave.org. Click on the donate tab, pick an amount that you want to come out each month, and they will handle all the rest. I stand behind these folks. Thank you so much. Let's get back to the show. Why the heck does a nurse need to write a book?
Well, great question. I guess the way this thing evolved was, I'd come home, I was basically, talk to either, some family members, a friend of mine, or I was talking to my cousin, and her response to all these stories were, you should write a book, sort of thing. And she had kind of repeated that to me many times over the years. And I finally asked her, Liz, honestly, you keep saying that. Do you really find it that interesting? Would you really sit down and read this? And she's like, oh, yeah. So she planted the seed back in my head. And I always kind of as I kind of relived a lot of my experiences, just started to formulate what I might or what I could write about. So she kind of planted the seed, and it was, a good 30 years before I really started working on it. I had a neighbor that he wrote a book, kind of a children's book, and I was talking to him, and that just kind of flipped a switch for me, talking to my neighbor, Brad, and I got to write my book now, sort of thing. So he kind of inspired me a little bit more. So I just kind of started, like I said, just kind of from day one, just laying there and talking to my neighbor, and, she was a nurse. So that's where the book starts. I talked to my neighbor who was a nurse, and maybe that's something I might want to look into. The more I thought about nursing, I felt it was a very honorable profession that, in the course of my life, I can look back and, well, what did you do? What did I do with my time here on earth? And I thought, well, I spent it in the service of helping others, which maybe I wouldn't make the most money or whatever, but I felt that it was something that would have given my life, in a sense, some validity, something I could be proud of. That kind of started it, and then I just started writing the stories, and the way the book kind of evolves, and it's a bit disjointed. It doesn't. I don't think it reads a story where, most stories have this beginning and end, and it flows real nice. Mine were just like, I went to work, and it was this day, and it was this experience, and I immediately flipped into this experience, and I went to next work, and then this happened. So it was just a bunch of happenings over the course of 30 some odd years. Good experiences, and some maybe not as pleasant. So yeah, that's why my cousin kept pushing me. I figured, yeah, okay, fine, I'm gonna do it.
Okay, so you've got a bunch of experiences in 30 years of experience. What kind of nurse have you been along the way?
Well, the bulk of it, if I'm going to label myself as what kind of nurse I was, I'm an emergency room nurse. That's been, I would say, 90% of my experience. When I first walked in, I really didn't know what I was going to do. And, as kind of Brad alluded to, I figured, I was going to be walking up and down a floor, taking temperatures, passing out pills, doing whatever I was going to do. But I got a glimpse of this emergency room, and I knew that's exactly where I wanted to be. I wanted to be down in that place. The hospital I was drawing blood at, they refer to it as the pit, and for some reason or another, that's really where I wanted to be. From that time, I had the opportunity to get on some ambulances and do some what they call critical care transport. And then I spent some time transitioning into some intensive care nursing. The hospital I worked at it was a fairly decent sized hospital. They had separate emergency rooms. They had a pediatric emergency room. So I ended up in there, which I really found very challenging and very rewarding. I love that PCR. And then, it kind of gave me this experience and stuff. And I saw a flyer come in, and they were looking for flight nurses. This another hospital I was working at, a flyer came in off their fax machine. And there was a flight program very close to me where this physician started this company, and he had a couple twin engine airplanes and a couple different helicopters. So with the experience I had gained prior, I felt, well, I'd probably be a pretty good shoo-in for that sort of thing. So, I kind of jumped into that transport. So I got into ground transport and air transport. And, kind of bounced around all over.
David, one thing that I found really interesting, because like I said earlier, I didn't know that there were all these different types of work that you could do as a nurse. I was really interested in the flight nursing, where you're up in the helicopter and you're moving these people from, accident sites to, treatment centers, or from, one treatment center, maybe in a rural community that couldn't provide the type of care that they needed. So you would get them on the helicopter or the plane and fly them somewhere else. And I know you just talked about that, but could you dive into that a little bit more? What exactly does that entail? Because I don't think a lot of people know that that's a type of work that nurses can do.
Yeah. Well, the flight nursing, I would describe it as like the most demanding job that a nurse, or physician, anybody could have. Your knowledge has to be a very broad range, because, you can be called out where, say, you're delivering a baby or transporting a baby that's in some sort of distress, right? Mm-hmm. Or a preterm mother that's, has a high risk pregnancy, and you have to be prepared to take care of that mom, or, potentially that baby, or both. So, a lot of OB nursing you need to be aware of. Then there's the whole trauma. A lot of it is trauma. So as far as your trauma skills and intervention, those skills have to be sharp, and then anything else that goes along within that. So what it entails is, a background in intensive care nursing, because these patients can be all different lines going in their wrists, in their neck, in their heart, and you need to know how to manipulate and read those lines, hook them up to monitors, know what those numbers mean, and adjust medications accordingly. So you need that kind of background in science nursing there. Emergency room nursing, you need to recognize on all the potential traumas, and then the interventions there. So like if you've been working in an ER for 10 years and you've seen, these docs put in chest tubes for a guy with a collapsed lung, if you're paying attention, that's a skill you're going to have, because, mm-hmm. You're going to get a guy that maybe, has a chest injury, collapsed his lung, and the only thing you can do is, decompress that chest. So, there's that intervention. One of the classes they sent us to, I found was phenomenal, was called the Flight Nurse Advanced Trauma Course. And when I learned, it's the same trauma course that they title it Advanced Trauma Life Support, that the surgeons go to. So, I found myself going to these classes that, a surgeon who's gone through medical school, has a number of years of residency, I'm attending the same course as he is. And from there, I got to learn.
Let me jump in here. So as you're going through these courses and you're on par with doctors, are you learning these procedures as a nurse? Like, how do I assist this flight surgeon doing it? Or are you, in effect, often the flight surgeon who's trying to keep someone alive, working at a level that's above RN?
Well, my scope of practice is enhanced or increased, elevated, if you will. There is no flight surgeon I'm with. So it's either me and another nurse, or me and another paramedic. So those skills are the ones that I have to acquire. Those are the skills I'm going to use. I'm not passing, like a nurse in the hospital might pass a scalpel or a forceps or a sponge in the OR. We land in a field and have to, do a cut down on this guy or something. I'm doing it. So it's a much bigger scope of practice.
So you're literally the lifeline. There's not a flight surgeon there. And then, babies in distress, prenatal, moms in distress. What's an example of a time where you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know, like if this person's even going to make it, but your care is able to get them to the next, level of care?
Well, I could tell you a couple stories. So once we were flown out to this rural hospital, hundreds of miles away from the city. And it was a 7-week-old baby. She had been in the intensive care unit for 6 weeks. She got home for a week. And she was there in the hospital, not doing very, very well at all. The nurses there, the physicians, they tried to, obtain, venous access. They weren't successful. And this kid was very hypoxic. Just the heart wasn't pumping well and wasn't oxygenating well. And it was a small kid, it's 4 kilograms, like 8 pounds.
Wow.
At 7 weeks old. And, we pulled in there, I walked in their newborn nursery and, just kind of shook my head. It was honestly, this was a situation where I knew what needed to happen, and 7-week-old baby, they've tried everything. I got to get this kid stabilized for transport. And, quite honestly, it's like, either we do it or I'm going to end up killing this kid. I don't want to kill this kid, and, say what you will, but, I just kind of said a prayer that, my interventions, my hands would be, be effective. And I was working with a medic, and I talked to the resident down at the University Hospital, said, this is what we have. He goes, this is what, we need you to do. I said, okay, So I looked at my partner and said, you get one chance, I'm going to do this, And so as luck would have it, I was able to slip an IV in this kid, sedate him, ventilated the kid. My partner dropped the tube. I hooked her up to a ventilator. And, and we flew her down there. We got her down there alive. And, at least we did our part. What they were able to do there, there was the handoff. That was one situation to go, I was very fortunate to have been able to step up. And the only thing I can say to that is if it wasn't for the extensive amount of experience I received in that pediatric ER way back when and working with those physicians, that were really so skilled and so brilliant and so inspiring, I would have never had the luck or the skill to perform down the road there, So I really, I give the credit to these individuals that, took the time to teach and inspire then. The ripple effect was amazing, how years later I was able to do this successfully.
David, I think I remember that story may have been in the book.
Mm-hmm.
The opening chapter, the chapter 1, the opening line of the book when I was narrating, you start the book off is with the line, it all started with nursing school. And then later on, you would, throughout that paragraph, you talk about, the different subjects you would take in and how you constantly, each class made you think of something new and interesting. Maybe you didn't want to go into nursing. And later in that first paragraph, you said every professor that you had a class with said the same thing. Stay in nursing. We need good nurses.
Yeah.
For some reason, I listened and adhered to their advice. So what can you tell us about nursing school itself? And then, and you talked about just a second ago when you were finishing your story about the inspiration that you got from the doctors. What did nursing school, how did the training that you got there inspire you to get into that ER or take those other steps? And then what about your teachers or your professors and the doctors? I know you mentioned a number of doctors throughout the book that you still inspire you to this day. Can you talk on those two topics a little bit?
Sure. Well, starting back at nursing school, I was young and dumb and as green as you could be there, and we first started, with the instructors, how do we wash our hands and why, and how effective is our hand washing? As basic and lame as that seems, but they would put this like invisible fluorescence over your hands, and then you'd wash your hands, and then they'd blacklight you, and all this fluorescence would light up. You're, wow, man, so if that's bacteria, they're still all over you, right? So we learned how to wash our hands. Nursing school was very interesting. Some of the instructors were phenomenal, and other ones were, I still can't kind of figure them out today. And I mentioned in the book, throughout nursing school and my nursing career, I always felt in a sense I was being punished for something. It's a very interesting culture. People are, I don't know, it's just people are like, what did you do wrong? Or you did this wrong. It's kind of an odd culture there. But nursing school afforded me the opportunity to learn a lot more about what they say, pathophysiology, and just getting used to patients and the basic patient care that we perform.
What about the doctors?
The doctors from nursing school really didn't have too much. I never had too much interaction with them. We'd go into some of these, private hospitals and work, and they'd have 2 or 3 doctors, and most of the doctors I found in that setting disregarded the nurse or the nursing student. Some of the docs can get pretty heady. So, I remember one time I asked, it's just, what's your name? Because I wanted to chart, Dr. So-and-so at patient's bedside. And he looked at me and goes, is that really important? And, I'm, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So, I just kind of moved on from there. So, I got a little glimpse through nursing school, how this hierarchy is in place. And it's very interesting because, you're reminded quite frequently is you're just a nurse.
Can you give one example of a doctor that, said something, did something that you still go back to today, and maybe that you have passed along to another, intern or nursing student that you work with? I know you had, in the book, you talked about training, new staff hires and things like that. Is there something that you, that a doctor told you in 1998 that you're, 21 years later, you're given that same advice?
Still hold on to?
Yeah.
Yeah. There were so many physicians that inspired me, God, I'd love to talk about all of them, but one of them was this Dr. John McDonald. He ran this flight program up here. I would just kind of stand in awe of this guy. He was a brilliant man, very skilled, very impassioned. And he always came back to do the right thing for the patient. Do the right thing for the patient. And you can kind of look at that and go, do I really need to be told that? But I certainly got where he was coming from. And I would say that really guides everything that I do today. However a patient presents, whatever their quote unquote chief complaint is, based on, what I feel, my knowledge or experiences, skills have been. And I always want to do the right thing for the patient and advocating for that patient. And sometimes, it's a challenge. It's a challenge. Not everybody holds on to that.
No, you made that abundantly clear in the book, how you always put, the patient was always the priority. And sometimes, there are occasions in the book, colleagues maybe didn't have that same belief or that same prioritization of the patient over everything else. And you bring that up in the book on numerous occasions. And it's funny because, you look at the reviews that your book gets. Some people criticize you for telling that, hey, this guy is arrogant and says he's the best nurse ever. And he, everybody else that he works with doesn't seem to, do their jobs. And other people say, hey, everything he's saying is right on the money. I was a nurse. It's exactly, the way that I felt about, some of the colleagues that I have. I found that dynamic very interesting because you would think in the medical profession where your whole job is you're a caretaker, without trying to diminish what you do, you would think that giving the person the care that they need wouldn't even be it wouldn't even be a thought. It would just be the default to whatever is going on. That's going to be the priority, to get that person the care they need, the treatment, get them into the room that they need to be in, or get to the doctor that they need to see. And reading the book and narrating the book, that always didn't, from your perspective, that didn't always happen. And that was, I found that very interesting. And some people were very critical of you of talking about that. And one thing that Pete and I were saying was, it's your book. You can kind of write whatever you want. And if some people don't like it, that's, then they can write their own book. I'm not sure if that's something that you should talk about or not, but is that something that you found in certain hospitals that you worked at more than others? Or there's just always people maybe that don't work as hard as other people do, have the same work ethic or the same standard that they live up to?
Well, I would say it's a both and kind of thing. It's not either or. In some hospitals I worked, there was always some individuals that maybe didn't necessarily work to their highest capacity. A patient would present at the door and, we'd watch one nurse just kind of turn her back to the door and start eating lunch. Like, really? You're not going to ask this, sort of thing. So she was very skillful in being evasive as far as, picking up the workload. So every once in a while it would be an isolated individual in my experience. And then in some other experiences, it seemed like that was the culture. It was the culture of the hospital. I wrote about the one place I went and, I said, I think the one thing that they had in common was they all hated patients. Charts would just stack up in the rack. They wouldn't bring anybody back. There were times I think there was 17 beds in that hospital. And there were times, and these are the guys that say, oh, he's the best and he thinks he's the best and better than anybody else. No, I don't. I just want to do my job. I went to school. I wanted to be a nurse. I wanted to be an ER nurse. I got the job I wanted, and I want to do it. So I'd work in this one place. Sometimes I'd have 10 patients, and then the other 4 would each have 1 or 2. Like, well, how is this happening? But that is just what it is. So culturally, I have found some places where that just seemed like that was the norm. They didn't really care, didn't like the patients. And some, they got like little cliques going. And, if you weren't in that group or if you weren't tight with that group, it just created different dynamics, not necessarily very positive.
What was it like? We often hear, a woman working in a man's world or women working in a man's world. Did you experience any sort of, reverse man in a woman's world at all? Is that something that's real?
I think that it is. It's kind of worked in a couple different ways. With many of the physicians through the years, I have seen, where I was kind of held to a different place or related to differently. And some of the female nurses, he doesn't talk to me like that. So, I could see between some of the, the male physicians and myself, we had much more camaraderie than what they had with some of the other female nurses. So I kind of saw some of that. And then, it's hard for me to, believe that necessarily I'd be a victim of that sort of reverse discrimination. But, other nurses, would tell me, well, Dave, it's because you're a guy. Dave, it's because you're a guy. And I'm like, really? I mean, these attitudes and this behavior towards me is, but they knew, there are all the girls on that side. So, I could say, yeah, I guess, at times I was a victim, and sometimes, situations would occur, and I'd speak out and then have to deal with that. And I'm sure it had to be a gender thing, because, if a woman said the same thing I said to another woman, it would be one thing. Man saying it, it's different. It just came off different.
How often do you find that you have to, when a patient comes into the ER or wherever you were working, how much care, are there times when you have to almost care for the family more than the actual patient? Where the family is maybe just distraught or just not handling it well, and the patient is okay, they're a little more calm, whatever the reason that they're in the hospital for. Do you find that sometimes you have to tend to the family a little bit more, or does it vary from patient to patient and family to family and situation to situation?
Well, each situation is different, and there will be a variance, but across the board, what they'll tell you, and what people really should recognize is, you get a patient that's coming in, whatever it is, it's a heart attack or a broken bone or whatever that is, but all those other individuals, the mother, the father, the brother, the sister, they're your patients too. Baby comes in sick, but the parents are the patients also. So, that nursing care and the whole dynamic really is, you don't just have one. You have, if you're going to do this job, I think, the right way is you have to care and be considerate of all those individuals. That's their loved one. This is a stressful moment for all of them. So I think, the skilled nurse will recognize that and then, work accordingly.
I had never thought about that. That not just the person in the bed is a patient. Everybody is your patient.
Yeah.
How much liberty will they give you depending on the situation?
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. It's, it can vary between physician to physician, and it can vary in institutions. Doing flight nursing, basically, when we would arrive on scene or a flight crew would arrive on scene, I pretty much take over total care of that patient. We might, consult with a physician, like, this is what I'm seeing, this is what we're thinking, sort of thing. But oftentimes, you have, I would say, the freedom working under protocols and such to, make decisions and do things. I've worked where I first started out working at the county hospital. It was almost the expectation that that patient would be totally worked up before the doc even got to the bedside. So, if a guy came in with chest pain, I would have his IV, his labs would be sent, EKG would be done, chest X-ray done, all that stuff done. I'm on that, getting everything done really before the doc gets there. And if you were the nurse that were basically waiting for the physician to arrive, in a sense that was frowned upon, in the sense you're not doing the right job, sort of thing.
You had a number of, like, you have a, when I was preparing the book, when I was narrating it, obviously it's a hospital, lots of fluids, lots of blood, things like that. Is there anything that, obviously you've come across just about everything. Is there anything that you still don't like to this day? You're like, oh, I have pumping stomachs or taking blood or stitches or whatever it is. Is there anything that you just don't like?
I guess,
like we all have a food, like some people don't like certain foods. Is there something that you just hate to do, but you have to do it because it's your job?
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm transporting this lady in preterm labor. She's in preterm labor. She has this condition called polyhydramnios, which is what they call an abnormal proliferation of amniotic fluid. So her amniotic sac where the baby is in is just full of all this fluid, right? Mm-hmm. And, we're getting her down there, and, we got her in an ambulance. We're about maybe 10, 15 minutes away. And, she says she has to use the bathroom. Right. So we slip her this bedpan, and, when they say that, your antennas go up like, man, she could be delivering, it's kind of the same sensation, I guess. I've never given birth, but, they say, oh, having to bear down, feel like you're going to embalm, it kind of tells you the baby's coming. So we slip this bedpan under there, and, I'm getting a little nervous. Well, I better take a look. I don't want to see a baby's head coming out. Right. Well, at that time, the amniotic sac, it breaks. And this water is everywhere in this ambulance. It was literally like if you had 2 5-gallon bottles of Arrowhead water and just emptied it everywhere. And this fluid is swishing around, like a tsunami in the back of this ambulance. And it's getting all over my boots and my flight suit. I'm like, man, I'm not digging this at all,
I remember that from the book.
Yeah.
I remember reading that. That was the one.
That was the thing. It's like, I didn't like that so much, the vomit or blood or feces, whatever. I'll clean it up. I'll get over it. But like this, it's like wicking up my flight suit. I didn't like that too much.
Yeah. That was the one part as a narrator, was some of these situations are a little bit tricky to try to figure out what's the tone. How do I narrate this in a way that it's still going to be entertaining, but we're still going to, convey the seriousness of the story. I remember reading that one in the book, and I'm like, okay, I'll have to kind of take a unique approach to the narration of this particular story, which there are a ton of them in the book that are, as you said, fluids, urine, vomit, all those things in there. So if you're a little bit weak at heart, you might want to skip a couple of those pages or read ahead or whatever it may be. But it said, it's part of what you do. One of the other parts that obviously you work in a hospital, and, sometimes the end isn't always what we want it to be. Some of the stories that you talked about in the book where the patients did die. How is that still hard to deal with on a day in and day out basis? Especially, I know you had some kids that died in the hospital, in the ER, or, en route somewhere. Talk about just, how do you get used to that? Do you get used to that? And how do you move on to the next one?
Yeah, well, that's an interesting question. And I don't know if I have the best answer. It's still, even to this day, that part is really still hard for me. I don't know how to put a finger on it. It's not like, these guys are coming in and they're my loved ones. They're not my mother or father, aunt or brother or anything. They're not family. But, we're all brothers and sisters under the sun. I love being an ER nurse, and, I want to do the best job I can. And when patients present, in situations that are, emergent and life-threatening, I think anybody that really loves this job, you want to do the best, you want to correct whatever you can correct and get them back well again. And obviously that's just not going to happen all the time. I find it, it's sad, to me. I just, I kind of grieve those losses a little bit and always look back, like, is there anything, he could have done different? How do I move on? I don't know. I don't know how I've been able to move on, through the course of, the lifetime of my career. I think you just kind of get tough and move on and clean the bed and get ready for the next patient. It's kind of demanding.
They want to become a nurse. Like, I've got to become a nurse, because you see it on TV, and there's doctors making out with nurses in the laundry room, and there's all this intrigue and drama. But like you're describing, you really have to clean up people's feces and their blood and their, they go septic, and you're cleaning wounds out. It can be nasty business, and you're bent over someone's bed all day. They smell terrible. Your back is killing you. I mean, talk about some of the realities for someone who's thinking, I want to become a nurse, and give us like the lowdown. What does it mean? Like, how do you know if you're 18 or 21 years old and you're trying to figure it out? What's your advice? Hey, this is Pete A. Turner from Lions Rock Productions. We create podcasts around here, and if you, your brand, or your company want to figure out how to do a podcast, just talk to me. I'll give you the advice on the right gear, the best plan, and show you how to take a podcast that makes sense for you, that's sustainable, that's scalable, and fun. Hit me up at pete@breakitdownshow.com. Let me help. I want to hear about it. How do you know if you're 18 or 21 years old and you're trying to figure it out? What's your advice?
It's tough. It's like, well, get ready. We're all different. I think we all, deal with challenges and stressors in different ways, and if I'm going to get up on my soapbox, what I have seen, which I was like, anybody, if you got half a brain, anybody can get through nursing school and become get their RN license. All right. Not everyone is going to become a nurse. Being a nurse, I think, is really the truest higher calling, and that's where the demand is. If you want to accept that demand, and what that requires is, in a sense, as challenging as it is, and it may sound, it's unconditional love. I don't care if the guy, and I've grown through the years, and there were times when I was younger, I didn't feel the same way I do now, and I'm glad I was able to grow and evolve. But you might have a guy punch you. You get a patient spit in your face. I'm still going to care for this guy. It's not about what you did to me. It's obviously, that patient's issue. So there's that part. That's, caring for anybody on all ends of the spectrum, whatever condition there is. And even if they came in this is the 15th time this month, this guy has come in, you're still going to treat that patient with respect and be a nurse to them or not. And that's a real challenge. And I see that, I've seen that all across the board, throughout the entire EMS agency. Seen guys, this is the 15th time you come here, or you're always calling 911. It's like, man, it's not your place to reprimand. All right. Do your job, get him to where he needs to be, and just do your job. So that's a challenge. Nursing is very challenging. You get exposed to all kinds of things. You need to protect yourself against all things, virus, bacteria. One hospital I worked, I think 33% of the nurses ended up with a positive skin test as exposure to tuberculosis. A needle stick can kill you. You got to be careful with that. Interesting dynamics. We're all people. Nursing administration, they have their challenges as far as staffing, and sometimes they'll work you to death. And you ask for that day off, you don't get it. Well, I've worked 10 days in a row. You've asked me to work all these. I've came in extra weekends. I want this day off. That's not going to happen. How do you package that and still feel, a valued employee? Nurses can work and be, really condescended to by a number of physicians, where they're the doctor, you're just a nurse. If you had any brains, you'd be a doctor, and they can see you kind of, you got to kind of package that up. So you have to be tough. I think you need a thick skin. It really, I think, comes from the individual. It's like, what are your core values? And if this is the job you're going to do and you're going to do it right, then all that stuff kind of has to be in line. I see things today that, it's not necessarily, the case. people are going into the business. Nursing salaries increased over the years. There's some decent money that can be made out there. And, it's a different culture. I can share with you. Can we drop some profanity in here?
I wish you fucking would.
Okay, good. So this is a prime example. I walked into work one day, and this lady's blood pressure is 60, and she's sick. She's laying in the bed, and I come in. It's like 7 o'clock in the morning, and I'm getting a report from this nurse, and I'm like, hey, what's up? Her pressure 60. He goes, well, so and so's sleeping. He's not going to do anything. He's going to send her home. Well, you can't send her home. Her blood pressure's bottomed out. That's the other thing. And this nurse looks straight in the eye, looks at me and says, I don't give a fuck how sick she is. I'll send her home. Peter, I don't have a response to that. I just don't even know why you're a nurse, how you're a nurse, how you have this job. I'm not Florence Nightingale. I'm never going to be perfect or anything, but I'm like, really? So, being the patient advocate, and as they allude to in a book, the knight in shining white armor that comes in to save the day. I call the doc, I get him up, I wake him up, I need you over here. Next thing you know, she's getting big lines, getting fluids, getting medications, vasopressors. We got her pressure back up and transfer her to a hospital with a higher level of care. Why it took 4 hours to get there, why that nurse didn't advocate, I can't speak to.
Right.
But those are some of the challenges. So what do I have to say? I guess if you're not going to do this job right, if you're not going to be a nurse, if you don't want to get on this team, go do something else.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, I know that when I'm there at the hospital, I'm pretty proactive, whether I'm, there visiting someone else or I need care. And I can be a bit of a jerk, but I can't stand just sitting there and then I see folks not doing their job. And I'm like, well, at least explain to me, like, hey, we're busy. We'll be back in like 20 minutes or something. Like, people just literally, it's almost as if you're in prison. Like you don't have any say. And I'm like, I'm just going to get up and walk out of here. Oh, well, you can't. I can't.
Yeah. Watch me.
Yeah, right. Exactly. I mean, it is that, like, look, everybody, like, I know that there's care and people care for your well-being, but they actually have to act like they care, like they're really present and like, hey, this is going on outside of this. You're not, because I don't know. Like, if I need to sit there and chill for 2 hours, then say, why don't you chill for 2 hours? Maybe call a friend on the phone. Everything's under control. Whatever it's going to be. Give me something to work with.
Yeah. No, the communication is key, and I think that's all what we want. And you can put out a lot of little fires just for that. It's all it takes. Go in the room, pop your head in the room, go, look, we got this going on. It's going to get back to you in just a few minutes. Or it's going to be a little while, whatever, the CT scan, they're reformatting it or something, and then, most people are like, okay, all right, great. Thank you. When you don't get that, those frustrations. Yeah.
Yeah, it is frustrating. Hey, so tell us what's next for you, man. You've got the book out, you're pushing it. What's going on? What are you going to do next?
I'm trying to think. I turned 62 in last summer, and the Social Security, I got my notification saying, hey, in about 3 years I can start collecting benefits. So I'm doing the math, going, hey, maybe I can retire. Maybe I can, if I can swing this, pay off a little bit of this. Maybe I can just kind of end it. So that was kind of neat. And then, then there was part of me was like, well, wait a minute, I don't know if I could do this for 3 more years, And then I started thinking, God, I don't know if I really want to stop doing this. Even with its challenges and frustrations and getting up early and going to work, I think what I've come to really accept is I love what I do. I just love what I do. There's days it's not easy, and I got to deal with some stuff, but I love what I do. I don't know what I'm going to do if I retire. There's a junior college down the road, and I've met with a number of the nursing instructors, and then it seems like there could be an avenue where I can do some instruction and teaching. So, I might go knock on their door and see if there's a spot for me there where I can kind of, hopefully, give back and inspire, the next generation of students coming up, hopefully lift them up and do some stuff. So I'm going to start to look in that. So, maybe education's going to be the next door for me.
That's the one thing, like David said, he loves what he does, or what he loves being a nurse. That's the one thing that I think I definitely picked up on reading the book, preparing the narration, then actually going through the narration, reading the book out loud, hearing it, was the passion that he has for it, and the compassion he has for not only the patients, but as you said, the family members are his patients too. And there are a number of examples in the book where he talks about the patients he gave one guy a shave and washed his face and brushed his teeth. So when his family came to visit him, he looked clean. He didn't look like he had been in the ER for, 3 days or whatever it was. So he definitely has the passion and the compassion to make everybody as comfortable as possible in a situation that none of us want to be in. And I think his love for his job definitely comes through in the book. And anyone that does read it, I think they will pick up on that. And that will more than outweigh any of those critics out there that say that he's arrogant or whatever it may be, that he's the best at his job. Well, in some cases, I really think he is, because he does have that compassion. He does have that energy and that love for the work.
And again, like we were saying earlier, you wrote the book. You get to be the guy, like that gets to be your book. And if someone wants to complain, they should write their goddamn book, Like, go put your 30 years of hard work into a sensible story, put your money forward, or even better, sell your book to somebody else and then say what you want to say. That's the thing. And then anybody who does want to get this book and want to understand nursing more from a practical level, from all these different jobs, go to Amazon and it's called Oh Nurse, and David Daniels, super easy to find. The link will be in the show notes. But you know the deal with this. Go to Amazon, buy it, 5-star rating, give a short review. It will literally take you less than 30 seconds to do that. And that's how you help people find the book. David, is this a good book for a young person who is thinking about becoming a nurse, or a parent who's trying to be a good guide to their kid on how to do this, or is this a field for them?
I would say, I think so. Everyone's walk through that career, just like, their whole life is going to be different. This was my experience. I've worked in a number of hospitals and a number of different facets in nursing. And, what I shared was, these years of experience. This is what I've seen. This is what I've done. This is what I've experienced. So I think those that are thinking about nursing, well, it's worth taking a look at, just to get an idea of what you may be stepping into and what your challenges could be. I think it's a great book for student nurses. Like you want to be a nurse and you're in the middle of this. Well, okay, here, before you put your boots on, take a look at this. I think it's a great book for medical students, and anybody there. And the reason that I say that is, as these paths kind of diverge, medicine and nursing, they come together at the bedside. We all work in the same house, if you will. And, I think it kind of opens our eyes as, well, what is that nurse that's there, 8 or 12 hours a day, with 3 or 4 or 8 patients? What are they doing? Mm-hmm. What are the demands on them? And how can we cohesively, work together to make it better for everybody? What I found is so ironic is, nurses pride themselves on the great care they give their patients. And physicians certainly pride themselves on how they practice their medicine and do the right thing. And everyone has this umbrella. You have the slogans at these hospitals. Great medicine, great people. The people in our community get the highest level of care. Everyone kind of pushes that stuff out, right? It's a badge of merit, if you will. Well, what I mean is, perhaps we should extend that same level of care to each other. Does that make sense? If we're treating all these patients and their families so well, why aren't we treating each other so well? And I think that I've seen this, that same level, that's something that maybe a glimpse can be gained and thought about there. So, I think the book can kind of reach, a wide variety of people, in the medical and the nursing field and the EMS field, and then, maybe those individuals that, just like, stories about hospitals and stuff, they might get a kick out of reading some of this stuff. Yeah.
Well, listen, man, I appreciate you coming on. We're coming up on the limit of our time here. But if no one else tells you, just for being a nurse, man, God bless you, because it's such an important thing to do for people, for humanity. It's great to know that you're out there contributing, trying to give us all a guide on how to, how to do it better, what it takes. I mean, all of this stuff. It's fantastic to know that you're out there and you're doing more than contributing. You're really helping to build a community around what you all do. And I appreciate the heck out of you for doing it.
Oh, thank you very much, Peter. It's been, it's been an honor. I got really lucky. Somehow I decided that was the career path I wanted to take, and I was able to get through the school, and I got the job I wanted, and so it's been a good run. It's been a good. I've gotten more out of it, I think, than what I've given to it. So, but thank you so very, very much.
Yeah, and thanks, Brad, for setting this up. I mean, it's neat to be able to share these stories. I never would have met David otherwise, and it's cool to know that because of Scott Husing, and then that turned into Gabby Juergens, and then that turned into Brad Enright. I've got all these new people in my life, and it's just fantastic. I love this part of the show.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's awesome. Brad was awesome. I don't know. I just thank my lucky stars. I got a call from him and, hey, I want to talk to you about this book. And I'm like, oh, yeah, okay, this sounds pretty good. And so he gave me some examples. I liked, I certainly really appreciated, the work he was doing and how he does it. And he was so impassioned about taking on this project, it was kind of flattering. The only thing is like, dude, I need you to listen to this and, just kind of, evaluate it. Let me know when you make some changes. Like, Brad, please. Can't I just trust you, man? I've lived these stories. I've written about them. I can't do these stories anymore. He's like, Dave, no, you have to.
Yeah.
But he did an awesome job.
I just wanted to make sure I was representing you because it was your book and your words and your life. And I wanted to make sure that, it was what you expected and what you, how you wanted to be represented, because this the one thing about audiobooks is they're really hard to record. So that just tells me how hard it is to write a book. And I have, I'm probably not going to write a book anytime in my life. So, I just wanted to be sure that what I was doing was giving you, the honor and the representation of all the hard work that you would not only just putting in the book, but just, the 30 years that you have put into, as you said, treating and caring for, everybody that has come through your doors.
Oh, thanks. You did over and above. Honestly, I am very, very pleased. So, yeah, very grateful. Yeah,
I appreciate it. It was a great. It was an honor to do it. And I said it was a great story, and I think it's got a lot of, as Pete was talking about, it's got a lot of ways to educate people in a number of ways, not just about nursing, but if you want to be a nurse, open your eyes to a whole new perspective of what you and your colleagues do on a day in and day out basis in that ER.
Awesome.